What's up, y'all? It's me. It's your boy, Mr. D, back at it again. This time with a little bit of essay 2 feedback. This is by no means an exhaustive list of things for you to work on. The first thing you should consult are the line-by-line comments I made on your paper, as well as the end comment. Those are specific to your paper. But, that being said, I did take a look at the feedback I gave, and I found that there were certain recurring elements that I just wanted to give everyone a reminder of, because I thought a little bit more emphasis on these topics could be helpful to those of you who had these comments on your paper. So if you got none of these comments, good for you. If you got some of them, maybe this is an opportunity to take things with a bit of a closer examination. So let's start with number 1, because this is the biggest topic I want to go into, which is something I commented on many papers, which is making sure that evidence selection and commentary are focused on linking to both the CI and the subpoint. Okay? Now, this was an increased challenge in Whitman, because Whitman is a more challenging prompt and text than Hawthorne was. And the thing about the structure of the paper is that you have two things you need to link to, and they both seem tempting, but they don't work without each other. If you're unclear on what this means, I want you to take a look at this example. Okay? So let's say our thesis is a value judgment that Olive Garden, the restaurant, is good. And we have 3 lines of reasoning. Reason 1, because they have amazing soup. Reason 2, they have amazing salad. And reason 3, they have amazing breadsticks. So let's think about body paragraph 1. If we need to link to both the CI and the subpoint, we're going to need evidence of amazing soup at Olive Garden. What would be the misfire here if we gave this evidence? Oh my gosh, last Tuesday I had the best soup at Chili's. It was amazing. Well, obviously, this is linking to the subpoint. You're talking about soup, but you're not talking about it in the context of Olive Garden. Therefore, it's irrelevant evidence. Same thing here. Oh my gosh, last Tuesday I got the chicken parmesan at Olive Garden. It was so good. You've linked to Olive Garden, but you haven't talked about the subpoint, which is soup. So good evidence would obviously be something like, last Tuesday I got the minestrone soup at Olive Garden, which was rich and healthy. Now, I think you can all easily understand this example because we're using simplified terms. The trick is when you start talking about literature, where the terms and vocabulary and sometimes even the figurative significance gets a little bit less clear. The question is, do you understand your evidence well enough to avoid only linking to one of the CI and subpoint? I also think a piece of advice I need to give is that some students who are not certain that they can link to both CI and subpoint will sometimes use the lead-in to establish CI or subpoint. That's not good enough. For example, that would look something like going back to this piece of evidence and saying, in the lead-in, when Mr. D got the minestrone, he said, quote, Olive Garden is great. Okay, I'm not going to assume you're lying per se, but I would love to see something directly quoted which you can link to minestrone. It doesn't have to be the word minestrone, but I need something. The CI or subpoint connection can't just be asserted. I need a textual basis. That's the biggest piece of feedback out of all of these. This could have been responsible for you getting anywhere from an A- to a C- because of this problem alone. Okay? I don't want to rant or ramble more than I usually do, but I just want to go back to something I said on day 1 of the course, which is nothing matters in a paper if it is not furthering your CI. So I saw a lot of essay 2s that covered some interesting subpoints, but neglected to mention the CI, and that's a problem. The second piece of feedback I don't have an example for because it takes so many forms, but it's general word choice, sentence structure, and awkwardness. That's just something you're going to continue to work on as a student. It's never going to go away, so don't feel too bad. But at the end of the day, I am judging whether you are using the right term to capture what you're talking about. And that was a piece of feedback I saw myself giving a lot. Now let's get to some more concrete examples. Here's something that came up given our introduction of the idea of split quotations, which is that some of you, as you can see here in the problem example, we're trying to do a split quotation and just put two quotations right next to each other. That doesn't work. Okay, you lose grammatical flow, which is something we're always trying to maintain. To fix that, you need to write some kind of connective lead-in, some language that makes the split quotations work together, work in concert with one another, as opposed to just have two quotations right next to each other. Number 4. This is also related to split quotations. I saw a decent amount of students who used a split quotation and then just listed the different citations in one final parenthetical. That's not correct. You need to have citations after each quoted part. So you can see here, I've got my first my first parenthetical after my first quote, and then I got a second one for the second part. Okay. You might say, but Mr. D, if I'm splitting up the quotation like 6 times, this will become unwieldy. You're totally right, but that's actually not an indication that this is wrong. It's an indication that you shouldn't be splitting up the quotation 6 times. Cool your jets. Split it up 2-3 times if you need to, but 6 is crazy. This is a really minor and specific one, but I'm just throwing it in here in case people need a reminder. When doing MLA citation, the period in a sentence that has a parenthetical will come after the parenthetical. Okay? I know that teachers like to harp on about the fact that the period goes in the quotation mark, and they're super right, except when there's one condition which is true. And that one condition is that you have a parenthetical citation. Problem is, in an English essay, you're always going to have a parenthetical citation. So the period is always going to come after the parenthetical. That's covered in my formatting video, but just a reminder. Here's a reminder about works cited formatting, another topic which is covered in my formatting video, but that I want to draw your attention to again. I hope you can notice 2 things that I've listed here, which is that you need to double space your entries. And I don't have it mentioned here, but notice how works cited is center justified while the entries are left justified. And finally, you need to indent if there's multiple lines, and you only indent lines 2 and beyond. So this would be incorrect if the writer, which I took a picture of, had Elton John. If that was indented, it would be wrong. But since the Spotify link is on the second line, that's correct. Here's the 7th topic I wanted to cover real quick, which is that your paper needs a creative title. It just shows some effort. It shows you're having some fun with the paper. I saw a lot of titles that sounded like The Importance of Self-Reliance or The Importance of Connecting with Others. I gave you 3 options there. You could give a title that captures the theme of the paper in a fun, creative way. So this paper is about self-reliance. So I said, hey, it's all about me. You could have a reference to something else. Here, I thought of a Shakespeare quote, "To thine own self be true," which has to do with self-reliance. So an allusion could be cool. And finally, the ultimate classic, which I talk about in my creative titles video, which is doing alliteration. So independent illuminations, right? Independent ideas or inspiration. And you're good. Just show some effort on the title. Here's a very niche one that only came up a few times, but I want everyone to see it just in case. Some people are submitting theses which are comparatively phrased when no comparison, sorry, I don't know why that doesn't have no comparison is happening. So yeah, sorry, I have this unnecessary information. Here are your problems. Here's an example. In Song of Myself, Whitman argues human nature is the best source of happiness. That's an argument, but it's weird to phrase it comparatively when there's no other source of happiness being introduced. That just doesn't work. Same thing with self-reliance is the most important trait to have. You're not comparing it to any other traits, so phrasing things argumentative or comparatively here just doesn't make much sense, and I'd prefer you go with something just as simple as argues one should practice self-reliance. Honestly, it's a simpler, easier thing to prove, and it really doesn't lose anything. Now I'm getting pretty nitty-gritty, and I acknowledge that we are like so far away from the topics that could lose you entire letter grades. Number 1 and number 2, making sure your evidence matches your subpoint and CI, and avoiding awkwardness and improper word choice and sentence structure. those could lose you almost infinite points. I guess there is a floor, but it's pretty low. This kind of stuff, including some of the stuff I've already been mentioning, but certainly number 9, cannot lose you a full letter grade. It can't lose you a half letter grade, but man, just takes it out of me to see it. So please, meet me halfway. On this particular nitpick, it's the idea that your whole paper is supposed to be in Times New Roman, but a lot of times students do not double-click their header, click Control-A, and change that to Times New Roman size 12 as well. And it's just a minor precision thing, but it bugs me. This is another minor one that, again, you're not going to lose like substantial points, but maybe in the future I'll make it more substantial because I'm taking the time to tell you right now. A lot of people use a quote for an intro hook, and I have no problem with that. It's great. But by God, it's a quote, and you know that quotes need lead-ins and they need citations. Just because it's the intro paragraph, MLA citations don't suddenly change rules. So note the problematic intro here and the fixed hook. Take a look at that if you got that note on your paper. Finally, we're at the end here. These are just a few topics that I didn't even feel like putting examples for because they're so basic. The first is that you shouldn't be using first and second person. The next is that a lot of you need to check my intro paragraph videos and take a look at what an effective transition looks like that zooms out before transitioning. If you are talking about the specific person or author or event in your quote, and then within one sentence or less, you are talking about the author of your literary work, that transition is too abrupt and you need to do a zoom out, then a zoom back in. See my video. Finally, this is like super niche, but I saw it a decent amount when I was grading. A lot of commentary I saw was reading the quote purely symbolically, where an element of the quote stands in as a symbol for another thing. So like, Whitman is in the ocean and someone says the ocean represents society. The problem with symbolic readings like this is not that they're inherently bad, but they often are a house of cards where if one of these symbolic elements that you're claiming is the case is not true, the entire reading falls apart. It's often far better to think about what ideas are suggested or evoked by imagery than to go to the full symbolic place. It's a subtle distinction, and if you're unclear about it, I'm happy to talk about it more in class. But the ideas suggested by an image is different than saying the image is another thing and fully represents it symbolically. So just be careful. If you're going to throw that out there, you really need to be sure and be clear in your reasoning. Okay, this was a bit of a, just random overview of a lot of topics that I just don't feel like marking in the next paper. I feel like a lot of them are binary. You either get this or you don't. We've had 2 essays at this point. I don't expect to be marking most, if not any, of the things labeled number 3 all the way down to whatever the last one was, 13. Number 1 and number 2 are always going to be with us. You're always going to be working on making sure that you link to the CI and subpoint, and you're always going to be working on word choice, sentence structure, and awkwardness. But nevertheless, those are the most important things, and the rest are elements that I know are within your control, and that I think with a little bit of effort, I shouldn't have to mark on anyone's paper in Essay 3.